He's one of those boxes.
So they were open to, like 6 o'clock this morning. They showed on the news. People that were online, they slept there overnight. The Chick-fil-A. They were going to open up.
Something there, right?
My friend got me a pink one and a candle. For a year.
One a week or what?
Yeah, once a week. So it's like a card
Look, he makes
yeah. So they asked the guy.
Is he able to see you?
Yes.
Well, I'm in New York. I would love to have him go on and redeem himself and be the good.
You can hear him.
We should be working now.
You hearing it now? Alright, so you got it on which can? You got this on mute. You had it on mute.
But that doesn't sound and this is mute. This isn't mute.
Well, this is stop recording.
But they get you. People try to say you're lying.
Takes 10 seconds. What? Alright, sounds good then, I guess. Hold the camera angle. Hold on. Let's check a different camera angle. What do I do? Yeah, if it does.
They don't give high there. They don't let you know. There's a whole
Yeah, you see, you gotta click that button. Look. Still didn't switch cameras. Watch.
Good, you're 17 now, very good.
You gotta click
want to
that.
get
You
over.
gotta click that.
When you're young, you want to get over.
Pull that down. Go to the third view. It shouldn't take more than 10 seconds. Watch. There we go. You put it here and then click a different number. You want to just use this method? I want you to record it too. Alright, so then unplug the other one.
Want me to get it? Yeah, but it's... Pastor Nick, do you at least want me to move the chairs? Because it's showing up on here. It's showing up on here, the chairs.
I still got another year, but we got to get well, everybody knows but you
It makes you want to clap how ridiculous it is.
An hour and a little bit. After we go through the 5 topics, we'll see from the audience. With good probability, Professor so-and-so did with the night with the study. I mean, unless you want to show I mean, you'd be like, yes, I have. That's a
Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
You guys have your tickets? What train did you get on? Ronkonkoma? On the wrong train.
Most people, I guess, waiting for the train.
John, would just reach out to that camera.
Well, you gotta have people who do that.
It's working hard to get the house out.
I don't know if my camera's going to be able to it's already at 30%.
let you know that that's 5 minutes.
Like I said, I know something like that.
We're not doing research in the military time here today. Look, so that's what I want to
I think it's more like a conversation where everyone
that clock is slow. That's why I took it.
Oh, okay.
Pastor Nick. Pastor Nick. Pastor Nick. I'm still streaming. Should I just leave it?
What?
I'm still streaming. Should I just leave it?
Yeah, you can just leave it for now. Just start.
Two minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Last one. Countdown.
Get a countdown.
I like that countdown thing on
Countdown is
TV with the
good.
rock band. Yeah, with the microwave, the countdown. Oh, that's fun. I love that. School of Rock sounds. I love that show.
That's the worst thing. Could be worse.
Everybody pay attention. Everybody, cell phone, vibrate, turn them off.
No Facebook.
Snapchat.
I put mine in airplane.
If you have the Domino's app, you can order a couple pies.
You're the moderator, right?
Well, we'd just like to welcome everybody to tonight's roundtable discussion. My name is Anthony Vino. I'm one of the directors of New York Apologetics. And to my right is Andrew Hersman. He's going to be representing the atheistic point of view tonight. To my left is Pastor Nick Mitchell. He's going to be taking the theistic point of view tonight. Let me just introduce Andrew to you. I know him for since I did my debate at LIU, and he's a very congenial, nice guy. It's a pleasure to have him here. So give him a warm welcome. Andrew's a 50-year-old atheist who was raised Roman Catholic. He believed in God when he was about 5 years old. He has openly professed his atheism since 2005. He hosts a TV show on a public access channel. He's a member of the American Atheist.org Society. He wrote a book called The Concept of Atheism. He's the pastor of the First Church of Atheism, and he's also an adjunct professor at Suffolk County Community College. So he's very involved in the community and regular everyday life. Pastor Nick Mitchell on my left, most of you know him. He's an associate pastor at the Abundant Life Church of God in Holbrook, in which you are sitting right now. Right? He's one of the founders and directors of New York Apologetics. He also hosts a weekly show on a local radio station. Pastor Nick believed in God at a very early age, and he now defends his faith with scientific, philosophical, and forensic evidence. So the topic for tonight's roundtable discussion is, what better explains reality, atheism or theism? And we're going to go through 5 different topics. Each of the speakers is going to get to go for each topic, and then they're going to get to discuss a little bit with each other about that specific topic. We're going to go through all 5. At the end of that, we're going to open it up to audience questions and answers. So if you have a question with regards to a particular topic, write it down. And when we open it up to questions and answers, you guys can ask Andrew Hersman or Nick Mitchell your question, and each one will get about a minute or two to respond, and the opposing would have a minute to rebut that. Okay? So without any further ado, Andrew Hersman, please. It's his opening 5 minutes.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Nick and Anthony for inviting me here. It's a great opportunity. I think it's really important to speak about different beliefs. This is America. We all have free speech. We have the right to believe what we want to believe, which is absolutely fantastic. We're all very lucky to have these freedoms. And just from my own experience, I see a lot of people who are afraid to talk about, whether it be politics or religion. Those two topics, for some reason, are just off the table, and it shouldn't be. I mean, everybody's allowed to have their opinion, and they should be talking about it. So, just a little bit about me. I consider myself more, it's called an agnostic atheist. In other words, I can't prove there's no God, but I don't believe in one. And the reason why I don't believe is because there's no evidence that really proves it to me. And, I would love for there to be a God. I would, who doesn't want eternal life, right? It's so fantastic, just the thought of it, But unfortunately, when you really come down to it and look at the evidence, I can't find any. And people tell me, oh, open your heart and all this, but it just hasn't come to me, And it's the thing about atheism, especially, my type of atheism. People react very strange when I tell them I'm an atheist, and there's all different types of reactions. Some people think I'm a devil worshiper, or I don't have any morals, and that's the reason why I wrote the book that I wrote, Concept of Atheism, because a lot of people don't understand what atheism really is. All it is a non-belief in a God, and it doesn't, that's all it is. There's no science, there's no, other belief except that. And, it's a shame that a lot of people look at atheists and view them as, evil people or mean people, or, like I said, without morals. And it's, that's one of the reasons why I came out as an outspoken atheist, because I wanted to make it clear to people that we're not bad people. We have morals, we know what's right and wrong, and we respect other people's views. I've lost so many, I guess, friends that, when they finally, because at first I wasn't outspoken about it, and when they heard about that I was an atheist, they looked at me in horror, and I literally ran away and never talked to me again. And why should people not get along, just because of their beliefs? And it hurts, because it's like, we all live on the same planet together. We all should be able to get along, even though, we have different points of view. And that's really what my goal is, to, understand each other, where we stand, why we believe what we believe, and again, I can't prove either way if there is a God or there isn't. But, my view is the burden of proof is on the person who makes the claim. I don't claim there's no God. I just reject the claim that there is one. So that's kind of where I stand right now. But hopefully this will be a good discussion, and maybe we'll get to think a little bit, on both sides and learn a little bit. And that's basically why we're here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Pastor Nick, if you'd like to start with your opening statement.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you don't hate atheists, or theists for that matter. But, we're here to have a discussion. I think that's what this is about. It's my intention tonight to show that there is evidence for the existence of God. Now, Andrew had said the word prove that there is God, and I think that nobody can prove that God exists, but nobody can disprove that God exists, or prove that God doesn't exist. So therefore, that point becomes moot. So it really comes down to sort of what evidences are out there that can point in either direction. And I think as a theist tonight, I'm going to represent the existence of God, not necessarily from a Christian perspective. I'm not going to get into the Bible tonight. I'm not going to get into all things Christian tonight. But we're first tonight going to deal with the idea of whether or not God exists. If we were able to show that, then we would go to which religion best represents that God. So tonight, I'm not going to get into Bible verses, but I am going to talk about the laws of logic, the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, the life, mind, and consciousness, and objective moral values. And I think through those things, we can begin to get a clear picture as to whether or not God exists, or whether it's rational to think that he does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're going to start with the first topic, would be the beginning and fine-tuning of the universe. In other words, the universe seems to be fine-tuned for life, and we know that the universe did come into existence. So the question is, what better explains the fine-tuning and beginning of the universe? And Andrew's going to give us the atheistic perspective.
All right. Well, like I said before, atheism really is just the, it's not scientific. It's just the disbelief of a God. But if you look at the universe, and they say it's fine-tuned, but when you look at it, and the only place we know of that has life is on this little tiny dot, this blue dot in space, right? The rest of the universe, as far as we know, doesn't have life. So how could it be fine-tuned for life when 99.999% of it doesn't have life? How is that fine-tuned? That doesn't make sense to me. So the way I look at it is like, let's say a pothole was fine-tuned for a puddle to fit in perfectly. That's basically what we're saying here, because we were actually, we evolved to fit onto this environment. It's not the other way around. So the thing is, the fact that when the environment changes, we adapt to it, and that's kind of proven. I mean, I think everybody pretty much agrees on the well, not the theory of evolution, but the actual fact that there are changes every time life is another person is born. They're a little bit different than the offspring. So I mean the parents. So if you think about it, change happens over time biologically, and when the environment changes, we change along with it. So you have to think, we're the ones that are adapting. We're the ones that are being fine-tuned for the environment. It's not, the environment wasn't made for us to live in. So that's basically where I stand on that.
Okay. Pesanik, what better explains the reality and the beginning of the universe and the fine-tuning of the universe?
Okay. It goes like this for me. I think the question is the material universe all that there is, or that there ever was, or that all that there ever will be? And one approach to answering this question that we have is called the cosmological argument, and it goes as follows. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Is the first premise true? Now, the first premise that everything that began to exist has a cause. We know in life that there is nothing that pops into existence without a cause. Everything comes from something else, or what's called contingent. Everything that we know of is contingent on something else. When we look on the earth, it's contingent on the space, on gravity, on the universe. Every one of us is contingent on our parents, and on our parents, and on our parents, and so on and so forth. Everything that we know of is contingent on something else. There is nothing that just pops into existence. So, with that being said, the first premise that nothing pops into existence, I think we can safely say is true, unless you have something that popped into existence that we don't know about. The second aspect of this is that the universe has a cause. We know that Albert Einstein in 1916 basically didn't like where his calculations were going. What he had done mathematically is figured out that the universe had a definite beginning. He didn't like that so much that he sort of included what they call a fudge factor into his calculations to try to make this somewhat of a constant and make this universe eternal. Now, it's very important from an atheistic point of view for the universe to be eternal, because if the universe has a cause, you now have to figure out that it has a cause. Now, how many of you have heard of the Big Bang Theory? Raise your hands if you've heard of it. Okay, that is considered today the most plausible model of the origin of the universe. And that is to say that the universe started a finite time ago, about 13.8 billion years ago, they say. Now, with that being said, the universe, as we know it, is made up of matter, space, energy, and time. Time, space, matter, and energy. So everything that is the universe came into existence when the universe came into existence. That means that whatever brought the universe into existence, remember, it has to have a cause, had to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and powerful. And that, to us, is the very definition of God. And I'll get into that a little further if it's necessary. As far as the fine-tuning of the universe, there are parameters like the speed of light, the gravitational constant, Planck's mass energy. There are actual constants that if they were changed, even a hair's breadth, there would be no life on this planet. Now, Andrew had said that because there's only life on this planet, how could the universe be fine-tuned for life? But that's exactly what that says. Because the universe is fine-tuned for life on this planet is what makes it so profound. Because if it was just a life-permitting universe, we would find life everywhere, and as you know, we don't.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is have discussion between the two of you. Do you have a question for him?
Well, I didn't know he was going to bring up the cosmological argument. There's a lot of flaws in that. For example, even if there was a cause, it doesn't automatically mean it was a God. You know, that's just an argument from ignorance, basically. Which, you know, it's a logical fallacy if you just assume that. You know, it could have been, who knows? I mean, we don't know. That's the thing. So it's better to say I don't know than to just assume there was a God. And the other thing is, you know, there's quantum fluctuations. There's all kinds of things we don't know about yet that could have caused it. And who knows? Maybe there wasn't a cause needed at all, because the laws of physics back when the universe was down to a singularity, it didn't exist. We didn't have any laws. We didn't have gravity. We didn't have time. We didn't have any laws of physics at all. So who says that we needed a cause back then? We really don't know. So to claim that you do know, I think it's a little, you know, disingenuous. I think it's better to say we don't know as of now. It's more honest.
Actually, Arvin Board, Guth and Delankin have come up with a theorem.
Mm-hmm.
And this theorem states that the universe would have had to have a beginning. And that is consistent with theism. Matter of fact, I had met with Arvin Board recently to ask him about that theorem, who, by the way, is not a theist. Mm-hmm. And to ask him if that's consistent, and does the universe have a finite beginning? He said that his theorem is absolutely consistent with theism. So from a scientific point of view, that's exactly how it is. But and the reason, you raise a good point. Why assume it's God? Mm-hmm. I mean, why because why would say that it's God? What we say is that the best explanation for the origin of the universe would be a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, all-powerful being. Now, the reason why we say it's a being is because the universe has to be either a material cause or an agent cause, because that's the only two types of causation there are. So a material cause would mean that a material would have had to bring the universe into existence. But since the universe is material and anything outside of it wouldn't be matter, being that the universe is matter, whatever brought it into existence had to be immaterial. And if whatever caused it happened, if it was an effect, a material effect, it would have happened simultaneously with its original cause. But because it's a finite time ago, 13.8 billion, it would have to be a decision. It would have to be something that would be an agent causation. So what is the best explanation for timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, and a mind? And that's why we say the best explanation for it is God. Now, to speak to the I don't know, to say, listen, we don't know. What's funny to me is that you don't know what it is, but you do know that it wasn't God. So do you know or don't you know? And if you do know, tell me what it is that you do know about the origin. What do you think brought it into existence?
Well, I'm not a scientist, and like I said, you know, I really don't know. And the thing is, you know, when you say nothing can come, you know, something can't come from nothing. I mean, but here you are saying that a God exists, and nobody knows who made God, right? That's the question also you hear a lot. And it's a good question, because if you're saying everything has to come from something, and now you have a God, that would be special pleading. That's a logical fallacy, because now you're saying one thing, but you have a special plea that says, well, wait a minute, my God is outside of that. And again, it's like if the universe always existed, then same thing with if God always existed, then the universe could have always existed. It's the same type of thing. So it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm not really arguing that there was a beginning or not. I mean, the scientists they know pretty well that at the age of the universe, with their calculations, and it's an interesting concept. But again, it's like you said something about a mind, right? I mean, have you ever seen a mind without a brain? Where would this mind be contained? You have to have something physical for it to be a mind. So again, to me, it's just too many questions. And again, I'd rather say I don't know than to definitely say I have an answer, because I don't think that's a fair way of saying it, because again, nobody really knows.
Do you want to address his question with regards to the mind?
I do want to address this question with regard to who made God.
Okay.
I think that's a good question. It's a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
But the first premise of the cosmological argument says that whatever began to exist has a cause. Not whatever exists has a cause. So it's not a special pleading, because whatever began to exist, the universe began to exist, therefore it has a cause. But God, being outside of time, space, and matter, would be eternal and therefore wouldn't have a cause. The very definition of God, the greatest conceivable being, would mean that he would be eternal in his nature. So to say who would create God would create what would be called an endless regress, which would be who created God, then who created he who created God, right, who created that God. And we know that we cannot bring an infinity into reality. So there has to be sort of an uncaused first cause. So philosophically, that's where we say that's God. Thank you.
That's an interesting concept. Okay.
Okay, we're good?
Yeah.
All right. Next topic is the laws of logic. Why don't we have Pastor Nick go first, if that's okay with you?
Yeah, I might butcher this. So. Logic. Now, interestingly enough, to me, this speaks to truth. And the way that I think about it is that truth is discovered, it's never decided. For example, the earth was round, but people thought it was flat. And even though they thought it was flat, it still was round. The truth of it, as it corresponds to reality, is always true. It's true then, it's true now. People discover truth. And the laws of logic are laws, and if you're not familiar with them, there are basically three laws of logic. One, which is called the law of identity, who I am. Two, the law of non-contradiction. And three, the law of the excluded middle, not necessarily in that order. Okay, so the law of non-contradiction means if something is true, it can't be false. If I'm sitting in front of you right now, you can't say that I'm not sitting in front of you right now. Okay, and also the law of the excluded middle means that something is either true or it's false. There is no middle ground. Okay? So if something is said to be true, then it is either a true statement or a false statement. Aristotle, when he came up with these and when he discovered these, he realized that these laws are they're in play right now, and nobody created them. They're outside of our humanity. These laws were discovered, and I would submit to you that without the God of the universe, which I think these stem from his nature, that is my belief, that they stem from his nature, we have no way to account for the laws of logic that our sort of thinking process operates by, like an operating system. So, that's it.
All right.
Andrew, from an atheistic perspective, how does an atheist explain the laws of logic from that perspective as it pertains to reality?
Well, I've given it some thought, and everyone says God is almighty, can do anything, right? But for some reason there are limits though with logic, right? Can God create a rock that he can't lift? That's a question that people have pondered. And it's the same thing. Can God create a mathematical problem that he can't solve? Now, you know, there's a problem right there because it puts limits on what God can do. And so then you have to ask, geez, is God really almighty if he can't create a rock that he can't lift? I mean, you start thinking about these things, and you know, it kind of contradicts itself. You know, it's like, is he almighty or not? You know, it's you gotta think about this, and it's all because of logic. You know, if you use logic and you ask these type of questions, you know, it's not so cut and dry anymore. You know, it's not just, oh, he's almighty and that's the end of it. You know, you really have to start thinking, are there limits to what this God can do? And if there are limits, then you know, then you really start to open up other questions as far as what are the limits, and why are there limits, and you know, what are the reasons for these limits? And it's an interesting concept because, you know, again, people want cut and dry. They just want to say, yeah, he's all good, he's almighty, he's all just, he's all loving, you know. And a lot of these things contradict each other. You know, if you say God is all just and he's all loving, you know, and think about this though, you know, if you're just and you're merciful, that's a direct contradiction right there. You know, because if you're merciful, then you're not imposing justice. So these are things that contradict each other. These are things that you have to think about logically, and find, you know. So what is the definition of God then? You know, is he all those things at once, or you know, or are there limits? So that's another reason why, you know, I have so many questions about God and religion. It's all about logic. You know.
Okay. Do you have a question for Andrew, or do you want to ask him a question?
Not about logic. No.
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
Not exactly a question.
Okay.
Well, you asked the question, if God created a rock so big that he can't lift it, what was the question?
Yeah, can he create a rock that he can't lift himself?
All right, so can God create a rock so big
Mm-hmm.
that he can't lift it, or so heavy
Right.
that he can't lift it? And then it's sort of like a catch-22.
Sure.
All right, so the idea is, we're talking about logic, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so to me, that would be a logical absurdity.
Sure.
And so God operating within the laws of logic that he created would never operate in a logical absurdity. If he did, it would go something like this. God can create a rock so heavy he can't lift,
Mhm.
and then lift it. That would be a logical absurdity.
Sure.
So to me, it would seem that God would actually be operating right within the limits of the logic of who he is, his nature, that we've discovered.
Mhm.
Meaning that he's not, you can't say to God, can you make yourself not exist?
Mhm.
Because that would violate the laws of non-contradiction,
Right.
or the laws of identity. So God is never going to violate those laws. I think it's consistent. Therefore, I think it does point to God.
Well, you know what? That's exactly what my point was. That it is, you know, there are limits because of logic, and that really was my point. That he does have to comply with those limits that you talked about.
There are more limits than that. For example,
Mhm.
God can't lie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he can't die. There are definitely limits. Because he's all powerful, doesn't mean that he could just do anything. So I think you got the two. I think you got the two that's confused.
No, well, to me, almighty means he can do everything, and that's why to me it's a contradiction. Because if you're saying he can do anything and everything, and then you oppose.
Actually, you're saying he can do anything and everything.
Well,
I'm saying he can only do things that are consistent with his nature.
Okay. See, I don't define what God is because everybody has a different, you know, idea of what God is. So when I talk about God, I let the person who believes in it tell me what the God is, their definition of it, and then why they believe it. Because as a non-believer, I can't define what you believe, right? So it's interesting because there's thousands and thousands of different versions of Christianity. They all have different views on the same book, on the same philosophy of you know, Jesus and all that. And the thing is, Christianity, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, if everybody, you know, I think there's, last time I checked, it was like 41,000 different sects of Christianity, And that's a lot of different points of view for the same Almighty God. And you know, again, that's why I can't define it. I have to rely on the believer's definition, and that's why it's hard to actually talk about it, because I could talk to you about your belief in God, and then I could go down the street to another church or somebody else, and they'll have a completely different view. And so again, it changes depending on who you talk to.
I think that's a good point, but I think at the onset, I had mentioned to you that I wasn't going to deal with it specifically from any religious standpoint.
Right.
But from the idea of the existence of God. So I would use good old Oxford dictionaries.
Okay.
I think the lexicographers over at Oxford did a pretty good job when they said that God would be the creator and the sustainer of the universe, the supreme being. And I think that I would use that for the definition.
Well, that's fair enough. But again, but supreme being again to me means no limits, no, completely almighty, able to do anything. That's to me, that's what supreme means. But again, it's semantics, I guess. If you want to really nitpick. So yeah, that's kind of where it leads off.
Okay. All right. On to the next topic, which is life, the mind, and consciousness. So, from an atheistic perspective, how would life, mind, and consciousness fit within the reality of an atheistic world?
That's a tough one, because we really don't understand consciousness. That science really hasn't gotten that far. So again, I'd really like to be honest and say, we really don't know how consciousness works and how it came about. But, if we look at nature and we look at what the scientists have found out so far, evolution is a fact. And the thing is, we can prove that with DNA, we can prove that with all the other evidence that's been around. And the whole thing about evolution is for survival. That's the whole goal for a species to survive, to adapt to the environment. And one of the best ways to survive is to have a consciousness, to have reason, to be self-aware, to know that you exist. And, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have any kind of will really to live, right? I mean, we have this something inside of us that wants to survive, right? We have this self-preservation built into us, and we feel hunger, we feel we need companionship, we need to have offspring, we need this is all about survival. It's all about keeping the species going. And I think part of that is the consciousness that came about. Without that, again, we would just be like a rock. Who would care? There'd be no reason to try to survive. So it's an interesting thing, because here we are. Nobody asked to be born, right? Here we are, and it's an amazing thing, because we want to survive. We know we exist. And it's this consciousness. It's fantastic. And so we have so many questions like, gee, how did this all come about? And if you look at it, to me it's very clear. The evolution process has gone to this point where we do anything now to survive. We help each other out. It's really an amazing thing. And I don't see a real God involved with it. It's just a natural occurrence that happens. So that's pretty much as far as science got with it.
Yeah. Okay. On life, I got to say first of all that there is no explanation for the origin of life on this planet. Even if evolution were true, it starts after life on this planet. And I think that, again, there's no explanation for the origin of the universe either. There's no explanation for the origin of life. And to me, that speaks of, again, the creative power of God. Coupled with that, though, consciousness that we have. There is no other animal with our consciousness. We are the only animal, if I could say that using your language, that can ask a question and that can formulate a question. There is no other rational animal on this planet that can do so. If evolution were true, then there would be others that could do that. But we're the only ones that can, again, offer a rational question, if you will, that can ask a question, that can formulate a question. And I believe because we were made in the image of God himself in that regard. I also think that we have a mind. And that mind sort of is beyond the natural process. In other words, we have thoughts. Aristotle said it best. He said, somehow, when we form a concept, he said, when we think about sort of an elephant, we take that elephant and we bring a picture of it into our thinking. And yet, our head doesn't get bigger and we don't get heavier. Somehow, this thing is in there and we don't grow or we don't need to. And we can actually think of the universe as a whole and we can picture it and yet stay here. You can't cut somebody's mind open and see their thoughts, if you will. Now, I want to say this, that Dr. Robert Lanza, who's considered by Time magazine to be the third most influential scientist in the world right now, has said that he can show through his theory that consciousness goes on beyond this grave, and that consciousness goes on, and that there is an afterlife, and that there is a spiritual component to man. And this is coming from a non-theist. Again, very influential guy. But for me, I would say that the fact that we have life, God would be the best explanation for the origin of life on this planet. B, the consciousness that we have is directly related to God in His image, and our mind that we have, that no other creature on this planet has. The millions of species, not one can formulate a question. We, my friends, are unique on this planet, thanks to God, in my opinion.
Just for the record, I do think that I get heavier when I think about food. Any questions for him?
Well, I just want to respond quickly to that because I'm glad, first of all, that you admitted that we really don't know how life started. The thing is, you said if evolution was true, there would be more species like us who can ask questions. And I don't agree with that because, yes, we are unique, but a giraffe is unique. There's no other species that has a long neck like that. There's many different animals that are unique in what they do. Some of them are the fastest, some of them are the strongest. We happen to be the most intelligent. It doesn't mean anything really. It's like, evolution doesn't work that way where, it's not a linear line. It doesn't mean, there has to be more species that are like us. And there are animals though that are self-aware. They know they exist. There's a thing called a mirror test where if an animal looks in the mirror and they can tell that it's really them as opposed to a separate animal, they are self-aware. And elephants are like that, dolphins are like that, gorillas are like that. There's many animals who are self-aware and know that when they look in the mirror, yes, they do exist. That's them in the mirror. They can identify that. So we're not really that unique in that respect, and we don't really know too much about other animals. I mean, they say dolphins have their own language. They could be smarter than us, and we don't know about it. Just because they don't have hands and can build things, that's their limitation. But again, there's still so many questions. But to me, it's just like, no, we're not really unique, not at all. As far as as far as animals are concerned, every animal is unique in their own way.
Would you like to respond to that or ask a question?
I would just like to say that I think that, a gorilla looking in a mirror,
Mm-hmm.
I had a dog that knew when my wife made chicken cutlets in the freezer. The dog would go to the fridge and would almost ask them, could almost formulate a question. But I'm going to go back to my original statement. And to my knowledge, there is no other living creature on this earth with the capacity of man. We are unique in that regard.
Any questions? No, we're good. Okay. Next topic is free will. How, from a theistic perspective, Do we have free will? Is that a possibility within your worldview? What explains that? What best explains that?
Within my, all right, free will means that we can make choices. All right, so I can choose to do this, I can choose to do that. But on an atheistic worldview, we would be molecules, sort of a chemical reaction. And in that chemical reaction, we really couldn't account for free will. Because we would just be sort of moving in any direction that our molecules tell us to go. So the fact that we have free will, and I think we all know that we have it, the only way to account for that would be, again, theism. You can never account for that on the atheistic worldview.
That's it? All right. That's simple enough. Well, you know, free will is an interesting thing because legally, our legal system is based on free will. In other words, we are held accountable for our actions, right? If I go out and rob a bank, they're going to arrest me because that was my free will to do it, right? I had the choice to do it. But think about this now. Here we have a God that supposedly knows everything, right? So he even knows if I'm going to go to hell or not before I'm even born, right? I mean, he knows everything. So if he already knows that, how am I possibly going to change that? No matter what I do, it's going to end up what he already knows. So he knows everything I'm going to do, and I can't do anything different because he's God, right? He knows what I'm going to do. Right? So if I try to do something different, then what happens? He doesn't know what I'm going to do then. Then he's not all knowing. So it is a contradiction there again. It's like, you know, they tell me he has this divine plan, and how can people change that with free will? Either he doesn't know everything, or we don't have free will. It's a tough one. I mean, I think we do have free will because, again, you know, the way our justice systems work, set up, you know, we take responsibility for our own actions. So again, if we have free will, then I don't see how God could know everything. It just contradicts each other. So it's another question I have about the way God works. You know, people make claims about God, and I always see contradictions about it.
So you said you had a question?
We had a question basically is, you know, how do you account for that? How do you account for, you know, do you believe in a divine plan? Do you believe that God knows everything, or?
I think, first of all, that's a great question.
Okay.
It really is. And it's a question that I've certainly enjoyed giving you an answer for. Right?
Okay.
But I would say that Andrew's question, if I could just rephrase it, is really, if God knows everything, then how can we operate in free will? Because if he knows I'm going to lift my left hand right now, what if I wanted to lift my right hand? That's kind of how this would go. And really, it has to do with God's knowledge versus, it's sort of an epistemological question, which is how God knows things. If you think that God is seeing things, so that he knows us based on what he sees, then what he would do is God would sort of be learning at that point, because he would be observing us. And then that type of sort of epistemology would make God not all-knowing.
Right.
Okay, because he would work by observation. So we know God doesn't work by observation. What it is that God's knowledge, he knows us so well. He knows every circumstance we're going to be fitted with. He knows everything we would do, everything we could do, and everything we will do. So even though God's knowledge is logically prior to what we do, he only knows it because that's what we would do. So it doesn't affect it. It's chronologically after we do it, but logically prior to when we do it. Therefore, there is no conflict with the omniscience of God and our free will.
I'm not sure I follow you 100% there, because I agree if you know, you might know every possibility, but again, if he does know the final outcome and that's set in stone and he can't change that, then where's the free will?
He only knows it because that's what we would do. So in other words, he's not affecting it. He knows it based on what it is that we would actually do. So his knowledge is prior, if I could say it that way, logically prior, but chronologically he comes after it. He only knows we did it because we did it.
Do you have an example of something else that would be logically prior so that me, Andrew, and everyone else could?
An example? of logically prior?
Versus chronologically prior.
All right, let's say that God does, let's say that I'm faced tonight with a question. Or let's say I'm going to drive my car. I'm driving my car on the way home. And I can take multiple paths home. So what happens is I get to a light where I can either go straight or I can make a turn. Now, based on what I'm going to do, I make a turn. And because I make that turn, I wind up on a completely different road. And because I wind up on a completely different road, I wind up getting into a car accident on that road. Now, had I gone straight, I would not be on the same road with that person that caused the accident, assuming that they caused the accident, because I'm a pretty decent driver. Just kidding. So, where does God? Are you okay, Mom? You want a drink? You want some water? Okay. So, now that I'm on this path, and I've changed my mind, the question is, did God know that or not? And the answer is that He knew, based on who I am, every decision that I would make, based on my free will. And because He's aware of it, doesn't mean that He caused it, doesn't mean that He controlled it, just means He's aware of it. How is He aware of it? Because His knowledge is so all-consuming that He knows everything that everyone's going to do always. But, again, that's chronologically after I would do it, based on His knowledge, logically prior to me doing it. If you think about it, it'll clear up, really.
Well, to me, it sounds like the dog chasing its tail, but, I mean, let me put it this way. Could it be possible that God knows everything you're going to do, every turn? And when you get into you approach a fork in the road, and you're thinking you're deciding to go right, you're thinking that's free will, but it really isn't. I mean, there's no other way you could decide differently. But you just think it because in your mind you're deciding it. But let's just say it's impossible to do any other different way.
So let me ask you this then: on atheism, if your molecules in simply a chemical reaction, how is it that you have free will? How can you account for free will?
Well, again, science doesn't know for sure. But you're just simplifying it and saying it's a chemical reaction. I mean, it could be a lot more than that. We still don't know enough about the brain, how it actually works. So, this again, it's.
Do you think that there is a spirit or an immaterial part of man?
No.
Then it would have to be a chemical reaction.
Yeah, but it's also.
But you just said it wouldn't be a chemical reaction.
Well, it would be a chemical reaction, but it could be a controlled one.
But even if it's a controlled one, what would be controlling it?
Well, laws of nature, basically.
But you're now assuming, where would those laws come from?
Well, the laws of nature always existed since the Big Bang.
Well, how could a Big Bang create laws?
It didn't. Well, it's another good question. But there are.
What I'm saying is, the atheistic world doesn't seem to be able to account for these. There's a lot of if, buts, and I don't know.
Well, sure, but again, I'd rather say I don't know and be honest than to claim something that could be wrong and say that it is true. So you have to kind of be honest with certain questions that we don't have answers for. And I know people feel uncomfortable when they don't have an answer to a certain thing. We all want to know answers, and it's really comforting to make up an answer or to assume an answer. And we've done that all throughout history. When we didn't understand what a lightning bolt was, we came up with this Thor god and said, oh well, that's what it's
But my question
Yeah.
is not based on something we don't know. It's based on something you said you do know. In other words, you said that there is no immaterial part to man, which would make us completely a chemical reaction. How do you account for free will if everything you do is a chemical reaction?
Well, again, I don't know.
That's
for
something
sure.
you said you know.
Yeah, no, it's a physical thing, absolutely. But again, it could be a controlled reaction based on what we. Again, chemistry is an interesting thing because you look at oil and water; they don't mix together, right? So
But the one thing I know about chemistry
Yeah.
is that it's consistent.
Well, not
if
really.
you mix it the same way, it sort of has the same reaction.
Well, no, because if you take oil and water and you bring it out into space where there's no gravity, suddenly it mixes.
But you're introducing a different element.
Right.
So again, it's very, very controlled. What I'm saying is, how do you account? In other words, you'd have to bring it to space. How do you account for free will when you're simply a chemical reaction? That's what I don't understand about atheism.
Right. Well,
And that's two things that we know. It's not something
Sure.
we don't know.
Sure.
So we couldn't claim that we don't know. We'd have to claim that either we are immaterial or we don't have free will. I don't see a third choice.
no, I agree, but
So then you're saying you don't have free will.
Well, I'm basing it really on our legal system. Again, we are held responsible for our actions. And for that to happen, we all have to kind of agree, that that's the moral way to do it. Because if I go rob a bank and say, well, I didn't have the free will, it was just a chemical reaction, that's not an excuse, right? I mean, think about it. You can't say that. It doesn't make sense.
So what you're saying is that while your worldview, atheism, does not account for free will, you know in experience you do have free will.
Yeah, well, I don't want to nitpick, but atheism really isn't a worldview to begin with. It's only an answer to a question of whether there's a God or not. And it doesn't really pertain to anything else. So,
Well, because you don't believe in a God, you would have to believe everything is material, that there is no cause to the universe. It would have to be
Not
material.
necessarily.
Well, it would have to be material. It couldn't be an agent.
there could be maybe a quantum fluctuation or
Still a
something.
material, not
Yeah,
an agent.
well, okay,
Of
okay.
some kind of material, or
Sure.
something other than that.
Sure.
But I'm saying it does affect your worldview. It actually,
Well, yes.
so it actually is a worldview.
Well, it doesn't have any tenets. It doesn't have any, holy book. It doesn't have any, it's really not a religion, and people think it is, but it's really a non-religion. That's why it's not an ism. It's a non-ism. Because again, there's no anything. It's just a non-belief. It's just it's not a thing really. It's a non-thing.
Do you think God is evil?
If the God of the Bible, I think, would be evil. I've read
But
the
if you have a
Bible.
non-belief, how could you be evil?
It's an interesting question, but if you think about the way this whole world is set up, it is a pretty evil system. If you think about it, I mean, here we are. Again, we're trying to survive, right? And the only way to do that is to nourish ourselves by killing animals and plants and living off of them. And they also have some kind of survival instinct. So here we are fighting other living beings. And why would somebody almighty and all good set something up like that, where we have to kill in order to survive? And we have this sensational, we have this desire to survive, and no matter what, and it's futile if you think about it, right? We're all going to die, so it's like, why? It's like this. It is, to me, it's kind of an evil setup. You're trying to force this on us. If it could have been a different way. There could have been other ways to nourish ourselves without killing, right? I mean, if he's almighty, there's other ways of doing things. And the way it's set up, if you think about it, it's kind of evil,
Would you like to respond, and then we'll go?
No, go ahead. Thank you.
Well, it's a great segue. I'm glad you brought up evil and what's right and wrong, because the next topic is objective morality. So, since you had just gone, why don't you take the time and explain what better explains objective morals in an atheistic world? Where do objective morals come from, and how do you account for them in an atheistic worldview?
Well, first of all, I don't think there is such a thing as objective morality. Everybody, again, it sort of ties in with evolution, where we as a group of people, we have a thing called empathy that we evolve with, right? And we want to be treated like, basically we should treat people the way, it's the golden rule, right? Everybody knows that golden rule. And it came before Christianity. That type of thinking has been around for a long time. I don't want to get punched, so I don't go punching you, right? We want to be treated the way, we treat people the way we want to be treated. And it's a good way of looking at things. It's a good way to form morality. but it's not set in stone. Because let's say about the punching thing. You know, sure, it might be immoral to punch somebody, but how about two people who go into a boxing ring and it's mutually consensual, and they box it out? Is that immoral? You know, they both agree to it? I don't think so. So there are, you know, things that we might say that are not moral, and in certain circumstances they are. So it's not one of those things where everything moral is set in stone. We have to go take each individual item and look at it and say, you know, is this moral in this situation? And after a while, we kind of all agree that, you know, like murder is wrong. Pretty much everybody agrees with that, you know, right? So, and the reason being is because we don't want to be killed ourselves. You know, we have empathy, and it's based on that. It's based on empathy. It's based on common sense that you know, we want to be treated, you know, just like anybody else wants to be treated. So that's really where morality comes from. It can't come from a book, because it's, you know, you know, you said we don't want to talk about the Bible, but you know, if morality comes from the Bible, I've read it, and there's a lot of things in there that I don't think are moral at all. You know, there's slavery, and there's rape, and, you know, murder, and all kinds of things in the book. And I look at it and I go, that's not moral. Slavery's not moral. You know, we know that. Nobody wants to be owned by another human being. We know that. So, you know, but it took us a while, because there was a time in history where slavery was moral. It was legal to own other human beings. It's hard to believe that now, but it's true. You know. So again, morality is not set in stone. At one time, it was moral to own someone, and now we realize, hey, no, it's not. You know? So again, it's on the situation. You have to take each individual thing and look at it and examine it for something to be, you know, to determine whether it's moral or not. That's where I stand.
Okay. My God, Andrew, you said mouthful.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you said, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I do think that there are objective moral values and duties. And I'll tell you how I think so. I think there is a standard. You said that to murder somebody is wrong. You yourself used the word evil. What is the standard by which you say something is wrong? For example, can you define evil for me? The word that you use. What is evil?
Well, again, it's you know, when you use empathy and somebody goes against, like, for example, you know, I hate to bring up Hitler, because usually, you know, that comes up in any kind of debate, and it's the extreme, you know. But he didn't have empathy. He didn't care about, you know, what he was doing to other people, and that's why he was evil, because he lacked that empathy. And that's what evil is to me. It's like, if you can't feel somebody else, if you can't understand that what you're doing is wrong, because, you know, you just can't understand, you know, you can't feel the way they feel. You can't put yourself in their shoes. That's evil. You know, that's wrong. We know that.
That still doesn't define evil. What is evil?
Yeah,
I mean, that would be something you consider to be
sure, but it's again.
Well, what is evil?
Well, again, it's based on empathy. So a lack of empathy.
So a lack of empathy is evil?
Absolutely, I would say so.
Okay, let me go to Hitler for a second.
Okay.
Hitler is over there, and he's just killing everybody that disagrees with him.
Right.
All right, we're over here, and we are not liking what Hitler's doing.
Sure.
So our society disagrees with his society.
Absolutely.
All right, who's to say that we're right and he's wrong?
Again, if you use empathy, and we know that killing is wrong because we don't want to be killed.
Why you're assuming killing is wrong? Why is killing wrong?
Again, the reason being is because we have empathy, and we know
Yeah,
that.
but who would assume that empathy is the standard? Who set that up? I mean, what I'm saying to you. I mean, what is the standard of right and wrong?
Well, no, society has set that up because.
Which society? It certainly wasn't Hitler's society.
No, well, he had his own personal view. He lacked empathy.
All right, so what society set up the standard then?
Well, again, like we live here in the United States, right? So our laws reflect our morality pretty much.
But our laws, though, are based on biblical principles. Which you,
Not always.
actually, the Declaration of Independence says that we have inalienable rights
Right.
that we were endowed by our Creator, which is what caused the Revolutionary War, which is what the Constitution was built on. Matter of fact, I can read to you the Gettysburg Address right now, and you can hear it for yourself. But nevertheless, not to get off topic.
That's debatable. But
Actually, it's not. But let's get to Hitler.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that Hitler's sort of society over there thinks it's okay to kill everybody. It's good for the Germans. The Germans are going to flourish. They have empathy one towards another, but they want to kill you and me,
Right.
because we don't fit into their plan. So who's this? Why can't we go over there and say, listen, you don't have empathy. This is wrong. And they say, we have plenty of empathy, just not for you. Get into the gas chamber. How is it that we can say that they're wrong without an objective moral? And listen, we know it was wrong. Why? Because there's an objective morality. Everybody knew it was wrong, including him and them. You know how we know that? Because when our society rose up and stopped their society, we held them accountable for it.
Sure.
And we held them accountable because we knew that they knew that they were wrong. If we thought for 1 minute, well, you know, that's his particular morality, we could have said, well, it's just like they wear, you know, they have blonde hair, we have dark hair. It would have been sort of like a convention, a social convention. But we held them and we put them on trial and we dealt with them because they were wrong. There are just some things that are really wrong. And on atheism,
Yeah.
we have no way of having a standard. See, when you, as a theist, we have the nature of God. Anything that departs from that nature would be evil. And that becomes our standard. So everybody's on the same page. Now, one might say, and I've heard this before, well, I don't believe in God, and yet I'm a moral person. Absolutely. Having the morals of God does not require that you believe in God. It just simply points to the fact that God created you, and that you bear the fingerprints of your Maker.
Okay, see, that's where we differ, because I believe, you know, the evolution process has caused us to develop empathy, and that is really the basis of morality. And, you know, when you look at Hitler, yeah, he had empathy for his own people, but he lacked empathy for the Jews and other certain people. And again, that lack of empathy is why he was evil. It's just that simple. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be such a complicated thing. It's you know, like I said, it's a very simple concept where, you know, people want to be treated the exact same way, you know, as
So what if I have empathy for a person,
Yeah.
and then I go and kill them? Am I evil?
How could you kill someone if you have empathy for
I
them?
feel sorry for
Well, before or after?
them. Both.
I doubt you'd kill somebody if you had empathy for them, because you wouldn't want to be killed.
Wouldn't empathy sort of, in other words, when you put empathy up as the standard,
Yeah.
okay, what if this room divided in half right now, all right, and 50% of this room decided that they wanted to kill the other 50% of the room?
Then they would start lacking empathy again.
All right, so let's say that half of these people
Right.
decided that torturing babies for fun was a good thing. And the other half said torturing babies for fun is a bad thing.
Right.
What becomes the standard? Let's say that that's all there is in the world. Now you're saying empathy is the standard,
Sure.
but they don't believe that.
It doesn't matter what they believe, but, you know, the reason why we don't kill babies is because we have empathy for them. And the people who want to kill babies don't have the empathy for them. They can't, you know, it's a lack of it. I don't see what the problem is. I think it's pretty clear to me.
So, in other words, Sam Harris,
Okay.
Michael Shermer, both of them agree that there are objective moral values.
I've heard that.
Yeah, they both agree that, and I think they're right in their stance. I don't think you can deny that there is a moral compass and a moral standard that we all operate by that is beyond us, and we're accountable. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If morality was something that could be decided, then we can all decide in here that it's okay to kill people tomorrow. And if we said to ourselves, let's all decide it's okay to kill people, even though we made that decision, even though we made that decision, sorry about that, we would have to, when we walk out of here, we would still know that that's wrong. We couldn't even decide against this morality. That's how objective it is. It defies our thinking process, which goes back to that molecule situation, free will. It defies it.
I think we're really going to have to agree to disagree on this one, because it all comes down to empathy, and it's just that simple.
Okay. Well, that concludes the back and forth portion of the debate. I think both of these guys deserve a round of applause. What I'd like to do now is open the floor up for questions and answers. So if maybe you raise your hand, let me, if I call on you, let me know if you have a question for Nick or a question for Andrew. I'm guessing, based upon the fact that I know most of your faces, a lot of these questions are going to be directed at Andrew. So we have to be, we have to be fair. He was nice enough to come in here. We want him to come back, right? So if you do have a question, raise your hand. Let me know, Andrew, or Pastor Nick, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you for sharing. A personal question: how has your moral compass as an atheist been developed?
Yeah, well, again, I like to say I empathize with people. I mean, I wouldn't go around killing people. I don't rape. I don't punch people in the face, because I don't want that to happen to me. And it sounds like a simple thing, and it is, because if we all treated each other the same way, the way we wanted to be treated, we wouldn't have any problems.
No, I heard you say about empathy. You mentioned empathy, which is a good point, towards life.
Sure.
And what do you feel about life in the womb? Do you feel that abortion shows empathy?
Well, that's not an atheistic view, because everybody has a different view on this.
I'm just asking
But my personal view, the legal definition of life is brainwaves and a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So when both of those are missing, then someone's declared dead. Mm-hmm. So I feel that if something in the womb has a heartbeat and they start having brainwaves, you can kind of call it a human. Even though it's a lot of people say it's a fetus, but at that point, I mean, that's the legal definition, I would say.
So what do you feel about our laws and so on, that gives permission, like pick the big topic, Planned Parenthood to sell body parts?
Right.
Do you feel we're,
Well, see, again, it comes down, you look at it, and we have empathy for babies, right? Because we don't want to see dead babies. Yeah. Obviously, no one wants to kill an innocent child. Yeah. The thing is, abortion itself is a very interesting topic. It's because so many people have a different view on it. Some people think the moment of conception is where life begins. Yeah. And some people think no, it's after when they're born. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot in between, right? So there has to be some kind of compromise, because you're not going to make everybody happy. And my compromise would be when you have the brain waves, when you have the heartbeat. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It pains me to do this.
We
gotta move on. Hold on a second. I gotta give Pastor Nick an opportunity, about a minute, to respond to what he said, if you'd like to.
For me, I view it as, I think that from the moment of conception, I think what's inside a woman is a human. I think it's human, and I think to kill that human and to stop it from living is wrong. That's my thought.
I'll defer to Chris. Sure. I think you have a question.
Hi.
Hi there.
You mentioned contradictions a lot. I noticed, and to have contradictions, you need to have a standard of truth. What standard of truth, and standing on your atheism, are you exactly appealing to? And it can't be society, because society is constantly changing.
Sure. Well, it's, again, atheism. People think it's a worldview, and I have to point out that it really isn't. There are no tenets. There are no holy books to follow. There's no leaders. There's no, it's just it's a belief, and that's really all it is. So you can't really base anything on atheism. You know, there is no, you know, you don't do anything in the name of atheism. It's just.
So it's arbitrary?
As far, well, specifically when you mean, what is arbitrary?
Like you're the arbiter of truth, I'm the arbiter of truth, and it's all whatever floats your boat?
Well, everybody's an individual, right? So we all have different ideas and different views, and you know, you're not going to find two atheists that are the same. You know, it's interesting because an atheist could be a Democrat, it could be a Republican, they can be a communist, whatever. You know, because atheism doesn't define who you are. It's just one lack of belief. That's one question. There's lots of things in the world that we have views on.
Okay, you want to respond?
No.
Okay, just keep in mind you're limited to one question. Try not to do follow-up questions. We're going to try to get as many in as possible. We have approximately another 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes the most. So, sir, in that.
Pastor Nick.
Yes.
If you believe that the natural laws of the universe couldn't be changed, it's a logical absurdity, then how can you believe that they were suspended twice, first for the virgin birth and then for the resurrection?
I don't think that when you say natural laws be suspended, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, if you
give me an example.
If you were to argue, say, miracles, then how could that be?
All right, so if I was to argue, I'm sorry, wait, I'm sorry. Did you say argue miracles?
If you were to say, they were both miracles, then how could that be any different from the logically absurd? It would just be semantics.
Okay, so what is exactly your question?
Well, how could they have been suspended twice? First for the virgin birth, and then for the resurrection. How can you believe in those two things?
On my view, God exists, and God can suspend a law or move inside or violate his own law if he wants to.
So the argument from ignorance.
It's not an argument from ignorance. It's an argument saying that God can, being that it's his creation, step in and touch something. For example, if the laws of physics weren't in place when God created the universe, then obviously he's outside who created the laws, right?
No.
Well,
it would
yes.
just be a supposition that you have formed.
Well, that's what theism is. It's not a supposition, that's my belief. So what I'm saying is, yeah. So I mean, if you're asking me according to what I believe, why I believe it, then you can't say it's an appeal to ignorance, right?
That's right.
So I think I answered the question.
Well, if it's not demonstrable, then it is an argument from ignorance.
Okay, one question. Okay. Andrew, would you like to add anything to that?
Not really, no.
Not really. Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
you were speaking about that we don't kill babies because we have empathy for them. Then how do you explain people who abort children with Down syndrome because they feel bad for them?
Well, a lot of people have personal opinions, right? And sometimes you have to weigh, what's best for somebody. Some people think living with Down syndrome would be almost torture or a terrible life, and they'd rather not have them go through that. So, so they could have empathy and say, I wouldn't want to live with Down syndrome, so why should my child have to do that? Why should they have to go through life with that? I'm not saying it's again, that's why there's no objective morality. Like some people might think that's the right thing to do, and some people might not, but it's all based on empathy. One person could empathize with the child and say, I don't want him to live that way. Another one would have empathy and say, no, no matter what, they deserve to have the life. Because personally, I would like to live, even with Down syndrome. So people have different opinions, even though they have empathy.
I'd like to ask a question. Oh. Go ahead.
This one's for Pastor Nick. Does all-knowing mean all-controlling? Like,
in what sense?
in the sense that was brought up before, that just because God knows everything, that meant that your steps were predestined by him. So does all-knowing mean all-controlling?
I think that all-controlling, all-powerful, and all-knowing are intermixed, but I think we operate according to our nature. For example, we can't fly, right?
Right.
So if we can't fly, we can operate according to our nature, but we can't fly because we want to. So there are restrictions.
My question is for Andrew about consciousness. My question is, if you believe in evolution, and you said that we are not basically apart from the animal kingdom, we are not separate, we are not special, if I can say that. Then basically what separates an animal, like an animal doesn't say, oh, I shouldn't kill this other animal because that's wrong, because that animals don't have that. They don't have what we have.
No, they don't have empathy, right?
When it comes to, another human saying, oh, that's wrong. How do we know that's wrong? So,
well, again, it comes down to empathy, and we evolved to empathy is a part of evolution. It's a survival instinct. It helps survive, because we help each other out based on how we, treat each other. And animals, I think there are some studies where some animals actually do have empathy, like, gorillas, they put them in cages, and, one of them got a special treat, and the other one, gave that treat to the other one because they felt bad that they didn't get one, So there are traits of empathy in the animal world. But in general, yeah, it's, the less, the less evolved, I guess you can say, the less chance of them having empathy or having self-awareness. And it's interesting because we as humans, we're unique in that situation, I guess. But again, like I gave the example of a giraffe. I mean, no other animal has that type of a neck. So again, every animal has its uniqueness.
so it is fair to say that we are unique in that aspect.
Well, in that aspect, yeah. But again, there are traces of it in other animals. It's just not as strong.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Andrew. Thank you for coming. You were introduced this evening as the founder of the first. Let me make sure I get this right. The founder of the first Church of Atheism.
Well, I'm not the founder, but I'm a pastor, and it's really just a technicality because when gay marriage became legal, there was a big demand for because pastors didn't want to, religious pastors didn't want to perform the ceremony, and a lot of gay people didn't want to get married in the the steps of town hall. They wanted to at the beach or somewhere, and so there was a need for people to step up, and legally the only way to do that is to become a so-called minister. Now it really is just a technicality. All it means is there's no real Church of Atheism. There's no such thing, but legally you have to kind of declare that in order to legally be able to marry someone.
That was
and
the
that was,
my
yeah,
question.
so that was the reason why I did it. But it's a good question. Thanks for it.
Ma'am, you had a question?
No, that's,
You too.
that's what I was
Okay,
saying.
yes.
Can you give us your definition of empathy?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's just do unto others as you it's like I said, it's very simple. Just treat others the way you want to be treated, and if you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and know how they would feel if you did something to them, that's empathy right there.
All right, I am going to ask a question.
Okay.
Because you had said, is it okay?
Sure,
okay.
absolutely.
You have said over and over there is no such thing as objective morality, and then you set up empathy as the objective morality. So I have to, what scientific evidence do you have that empathy exists, and why do you say there's no objective morality and yet set empathy up as the objective morality?
All right, that's a good question.
That was two, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it is objective to the point where, yes, we use that as the standard.
So there is objective
well,
morality.
if you use that as a standard, however,
right, you're using that.
Right. However, like I explained with the with the Down syndrome baby, you can have different points of view and still have empathy. So there could be different outcomes, even though you have empathy. It's the way you look at it. So one person might have empathy and say morality is to abort the child with Down syndrome, and on the other hand, you have somebody else who says no, it's more moral to let them live, even though they do have it.
And the scientific evidence for empathy?
Well, I don't know if there's I'm not a scientist, so I can't really tell. I mean, I haven't.
But you know you have it.
I think pretty much everybody has it, unless, again, if you're, you know, for some reason, you know, there are things in people that are abnormal. You know, that there are people who have what we call evil, you know, in them, and it's, to me, it's a lack of empathy. So yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, well, let me form it first. I agree with you that empathy is good and we should be empathetic towards others.
Sure.
However, my opinion on empathy doesn't hold weight when it comes to objective truth. In other words, my opinion is, you know, it doesn't matter whether something's true or not because I believe it's true or not. So my question is, what authority or what objective basis does empathy hold on me? Or in other words, why am I bound to being empathetic towards others objectively? Not. Do you understand my question?
Sort of. I think it goes again. It's back to what we said before. Is, you know, everybody has empathy in them, but it's again, it depends on your point of view. So, you know, you've got to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And if you believe something, it doesn't automatically make it true, right? So if you believe it's okay to abort someone with Down syndrome, doesn't automatically make it moral, right? I mean, some people might disagree with you. So there's the problem there. It's like, you know, it can't be completely objective because it's not set in stone. There are different points of view, and even though you can have two people with empathy and have a different outcome, basically, right? So that's how it works.
I don't think we're going to be able to get to the rest of the questions, but I'm going to defer to past Nick because he does have something to add or ask.
I have one thought with empathy.
Okay.
Empathy means, someone asked, the ability to understand, share the feelings of another. That would be the definition. What if you have those that are empathetic to Hitler and those that are empathetic to America? Who's correct?
Empathetic to Hitler. That's an interesting concept. Empathetic to him as a human being, or his point of view?
His whole system. Yes. Empathetic to him.
Well,
there's those that are empathetic to Hitler and those that are empathetic.
See, like you know, like I could be empathetic towards Hitler as a human being. You know, I don't want to see anybody get killed or you know, and I value life. So
not wanting to see someone get killed has nothing to do with empathy. In other words, those that would sort of feel for Hitler and understand his thinking and sort of be empathetic to him, how does that make what he does wrong?
Now, see, then you're lacking empathy also, because
I'm reading you the definition.
Yeah, but you know, if you agree with his lack of empathy, then you're
I'm agreeing with the definition of empathy. It says the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Right. So if I was the ability to understand Hitler and share his feelings, I am having empathy with him. Why does that make me wrong?
Well, okay. That's a fair question. I mean, if you're taking
there's no objective,
but you're taking the dictionary definition, which is I don't agree with a lot of definitions in the dictionary.
You're redefining empathy? I'm
not redefining it, but you know, for example, again, like if you look up atheism, for example, in the dictionary, I don't agree with that either.
But we're on empathy.
Right. But again, I don't agree with the definition. You know, the way it's in.
What I have empathy now.
What I'd like to
have towards him. I was agnostic, so I feel for him.
What I'd like to define now is conclusion. Okay, this is the conclusion of our roundtable discussion. I'd just like to give these guys another round.
All right.
I'd also like to have an open invitation to Andrew if you'd ever like to come back. I would love to, do this again.
Sure,
I think it was really good for everybody to